Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for letting me talk about this very interesting topic. My name is Anders West. I'm a stroke doctor at the Head Hospital in Denmark, Rigshospitalet in Copenhagen. And this first slide illustrates quite well the importance of the light we need our human hair. And this is my children receiving the light, but it's also illustrating the problem that we see in our stroke units and also in other hospital units, because the patient and actually other diseases is seeing that they don't have the possibility to go outside and receive this important light. I have done research in the last 14 years in post-stroke complications, and I see that it's a huge problem, the circadian disturbances. And a little background first, and this is a picture of the Nordic god, Balder, who's unfortunately is killed. He's also the most beautiful god. And a little about stroke. Stroke is very shortly is a clot in artery, and it's actually also bleeding inside the brain or just outside the brain. One of the most important things is not we think about stroke and we think about the disability to speech and the mobility and so on, but most stroke patients, and actually also other neurological diseases patients, are complaining about depression and sleep quality and fatigue and anxiety, are very high frequent complications. And actually 1/3 of the stroke patients get depression. It's not because they are sad about the decreased mobility or so on, but it's a chemical disturbances in the brain. Fatigue is a huge problem. 40% of our stroke patients are complaining that is the worst complication after stroke. And when we see into these complications, we can see that these have significant influence to the cognitive function, the functional recovery, the quality of life, and actually also the survival after stroke, especially when we relate it to depression and fatigue. So it's a huge problem. The interesting part is that these complications may have seemed to be associated to the circadian rhythm. And these complications, of course, cost a lot of money for the society, and a lot of manpower hours are used to this complication inside the hospital and outside the hospital and in the nursing home. We have got a very fantastic introduction to the circadian system, but very shortly we need the blue light, and also activity and food intake may influence the circadian light, and therefore right light at the right time. So what about our patient? They are admitted in a hospital. They don't have the possibility to go outside. They only receive light through the windows. Their circadian rhythm may be severely disturbed. And we have also made a paper just to look at the circadian rhythm in temperature. And we can see there's severe disturbances in the temperature regulation after stroke. So we've done this study about to install naturalistic light inside the hospital. We have done a method paper about that. So if you want the detail, you can read that. The Light Project. And it was a RCT study. We have this circadian unit where we installed light in all kind of rooms, in toilets, hallways, dining rooms, and all the patient rooms. And we were so lucky to have equally units. That was our control unit with normal indoor lighting. And here you can see that the blue line is the circadian light. And the red dot one is the normal indoor lighting at the control unit. You can see here in the morning, the light is going bright, and in the middle of the day, it's very bright and white. And in the afternoon, you see this red light. And you can see the huge difference between the circadian light and the indoor lighting. But when we talk about circadian light, it's important to mention the spectrum distribution, because it's not, our brain cannot see the right spectrum. So it's not enough to just describe light as Kelvin temperature, but we need to have the right spectrum. And here in the first picture, In the top, you can see the melanopic light spectrum. It's the light blue one, and you can see how high content stimulation it has in our eyes. And if you see in the picture below it, you can see very low amounts of the melanopic spectrum. And therefore, you can see this in the normal indoor lighting, our circadian system receives almost no stimulation compared to the circadian light. We were very surprised to actually see so huge significant difference. In the first, we measured circadian rhythm in melatonin and cortisol every 4 hours, and we actually found that at the circadian unit, the melatonin level was higher, and it's beginning to have a normal rhythmicity. All the stroke patients at the inclusion have almost no rhythmicity in melatonin levels. So actually a very interesting finding. When we look at the cortisol, we could see that there was a significant increase in the morning hours at the circadian units, and we need cortisol in the morning to awake the body. So we need to be stressed in the morning. And we have a paper about that too. When we look at the sleepiness and fatigue result, we found that the circadian unit, there was reduced fatigue and higher rested feeling. The rested feelings increased by 40%, and fatigue was reduced with about percent. There was no significant difference regarding sleep quality between the groups. One of the primary outcome was depression in the circadian units at time of discharge. You can see that depression was decreased by 50%. And that is the same effect we see when we give antidepressant medication, which actually works very well in our patients. Well-being was increased by almost 50%, and anxiety was reduced by almost 30%. No effect on cognition was seen, and I'm happy to see that this is also a topic that we need to explore. Why do light not regulate cognition so much? Maybe it's because of it's only the executive function, but we are doing a new study about that. A very interesting topic regarding circadian regulation is the metabolic processes in stroke patients. When we think about stroke patient, we think about, as I talked before, the possibility to speech and move around. But stroke also affects the whole body. We have done some research that to show that it's not only the brain that is damaged, it's all the organs, dysregulation. You could see the circadian disturbances in all the kind of metabolic processes we investigated. And we found circadian disturbance in coagulation system. This is a system that is very important for making clots and prevent clots from happening in the body. And we could see disturbance bone metabolism and thyroid hormone disturbances, and probably also other biochemical processes that may be affected after stroke. When we look at these metabolic processes in our cohort, we could see that in the light group, parathyroid hormone was decreasing at time of discharge. And that is actually also what we see in other published data that have investigated parathyroid hormone in people who work under the sunlight. So maybe this finding could prevent bone loss during hospitalization, because parathyroid hormone is actually destroying the bones. And this is not published data. We also look at the coagulation system, because we know that the coagulation system is very disturbed after stroke, and maybe one of the reasons to that stroke happening in the morning hours. And we can actually see a normalization of this coagulation system in the time of discharge in the circadian groups. So very interesting finding. And maybe this can prevent some of the stroke we are seeing. So what do we know about the light in patients? We've done a review, and we found only 29 papers out of 10,000 papers in PubMed. and all other databases. And if we look at the studies that have found positive effect of light, we could see that it's in regard to patient that was admitted for above 5 days. And that correlates very well to what we know about circadian regulation of light, that it's take time to be regulated, as we know of jet lag. So this was a very interesting findings. And one of the other things we look into, that if you could see that there was used a right spectrum, it also seems to be a positive outcome. Yeah. So metabolic circadian processes. The question is that, does these metabolic processes regulate by the stimulation of light? Maybe some of them. Our data show that when we look at processes south from the neck, it may not have so huge influence. Light seems to be a very important factor for things that happen inside the brain, as depression, anxiety, etc. But when we look at metabolic processes that are regulated inside the organs, it may seem that activity and food intake and sleep are the main regulator. More research is needed in that area, as we heard before. And the last, I will just thank all the patients that during the hardest time of their life were able to be in this study, and we could take blood from them every 4 hours during the night. Also, Associate Professor Helle Iversen, which was in charge of the study. And the last slide is what I'm seeing when I'm driving home from work. You can see here that people is living in quite different kind of light. And my neighbor is very blue light, so I don't think he's have so well circadian rhythm. And my daughter's dollhouse is installed with circadian light too, because it's so important.
Well, thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. And this whole question about metabolic processes and bone health and linking into what Shadab was saying about falls, it seems to be a virtuous circle, because people are falling less, but also their bones are stronger when they do fall. So you've installed this in your hospital. Are you seeing this expanding elsewhere?
Yeah, it's interesting to see how fast it's go now, but I still think that there is need a lot of more research in that area. I was one of the first that did some research. The study is 10 years old, but in the last 10 years, I have only seen that area is increasing, and it's only going to be more important to look into that. I think in the future, all kind of homes installed with light that is somewhat circadian regulated, and we cannot ignore how important the light is. And as also Shadab shows, that it's similar what we are finding, and therefore it's maybe so important. This huge different from the past is that, and it's a good thing, that nursing homes are now in several places in Denmark installed with circadian light, and especially dementia patients are lacking this circadian regulation. So maybe because we are healthy brains, we can regulate our circadian rhythm, just our bicycle trip from home, from work. But I think in the future, we look into a future with circadian lighting in buildings where people don't have the possibility to go outside so much.
Anders, this issue about cognition, and I take it that you're doing more tests, but I think we've always assumed that one of the major benefits of getting the circadian lighting right is that you get an improvement in cognition, almost as a byproduct of being of having a healthy body.
Yeah, but I think in our patients, the stroke are affecting so much neurons and networking that the light cannot heal the brain. But now we are looking in the executive function, more the a brain area that is not affected by the stroke, because our cognition test we did in this study was looking at all domains, and this was probably too much and reduced the power of the statistic. But in healthy individuals, I think the light should have a huge impact on our cognition, but not in brain damage.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much for that. The chat has been going on about how poorly we define our light sources, and we only talk about correlated color temperature without talking about what's inside that spectrum. And that's really where we're going. That's where the conversation is going. Everyone is saying the same thing. We're not trying hard enough because it gets more complicated.
But I did notice in the paper that you shared that you had got the different alpha opic lux. So I think that if you take the time to read the papers, particularly well-designed papers, they do include that information. So thank you again, Anders. That was just fascinating.